So welcome, welcome, those of you coming in. Oh, hi, Dana. Jennifer, seeing some familiar faces, or I'm sorry, names.
You taking attendance right now too for your class?
No, they just have to write a reflection. That would be too hard for me. All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I am your stream host for Stream 1. My name is Dr. Brianna Beaupre. I'm an assistant professor at Wichita State, and I'm also a board member of CrimCon. So welcome to the first ever CrimCon virtual conference. We're happy to have you here. Just some things to keep in mind. We'll be proceeding in the order of the program. Each presenter will have 10 minutes. And when you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box. So this is what it should look like for attendees. You can check your audio settings, things like that. There is no chat feature in this stream, and you can ask questions here. And just remember to have fun. This conference is meant to be something a little different from the norm. So we're really excited to have you here. And I'm very excited for this panel. As I mentioned to the panelists, I'm having my corrections class attend instead of our regular Zoom session. So the timing worked out perfectly, and I'm excited to see their findings. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can go ahead and share yours. Perfect.
It would be good if I unmuted myself. Thank you, Bree. I am Dr. Tim Holler. I'm an associate professor of criminal justice at the University of Pitt, Greensburg. I'm also the director of the Community Arts and Reintegration Project. This presentation is titled Art Community Collaboration and Youth Resiliency, the Community Arts and Reintegration Project. First and foremost, this is an idea in development, so please bear with me. I appreciate having a venue like this to really explore these concepts and hopefully receive some feedback on how best to approach the issue of resiliency in its many forms. So let me briefly start by talking about the very beginning of this project. I've always felt that within the discipline of criminal justice, academics have a responsibility to use our knowledge and expertise to effect some sort of change. You can't look at criminal justice processes or policies and think everything is fine here. And it becomes somewhat of a compulsion trying to figure out where you best fit, where you can impact that necessary change. So, some people do that by immersing themselves in the data and crunching the numbers. Others dive into the depths of people's psyches to try to figure out their criminality and so on. So there are numerous ways to address one's concern and find one's fit within this discipline. I've always been the type of person, an academic, who really believed that my place was helping to create, implement, and be a continuing part of some sort of criminal justice-based programming. My own experiences with the juvenile system led me to consider restorative justice principles as a basis for my own work. And then in graduate school and throughout the beginnings of my career as a professor, I found that reentry work was also a part of my calling, so to speak. I was also introduced during my graduate schooling to the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program and the restoration of young men that was taking place throughout Philly. If you've ever been there, you absolutely have seen the murals that are in and around Philadelphia. Particularly, there are about 4,000 of them, not all of them from the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program, but if you've seen them, you know where they are, you can see it. And if you haven't had the opportunity to do that, by all means, please do at some point. So this is how I came to the point where I said, I want to create a program that can hopefully help reintegrate people and reacclimate them into their communities. And I found myself several years ago writing a grant for a community-based mural arts program that was modeled after the PMAP including its use of restorative practices. So over the course of about 6 years, I guess it's been, I guided the development and implementation of the Community Arts and Reintegration Project. Now, the original concept was supposed to be a way for adult probationers to reintegrate in the community, but we got some pushback from community members. So we started really by using justice-involved youth. So we use justice-involved youth, community volunteers, and community partnerships to design, paint, and install large-scale community murals throughout Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. And the program is really built around 3 primary goals. The first is community revitalization, which was already taking place throughout the county. We just wanted to figure out how we could be a part of it. The second is community building and collaboration, which you'll see as we progress throughout the presentation. And then the third and most important, obviously, is that youth reintegration. I say reintegration knowing fully that many of these youth are never taken out of their homes. However, some of them may be, but it's my firm belief that an adjudication of any sort creates an immediate disconnect between the youth and their community, whether it be the label and the internalization that comes with it, or kind of outright community exclusion, which we often see more so in the adult population. But either way, this creates a need for a form of reintegration. I am also not naive to think that many of these kids probably didn't feel a part of their communities prior to their justice involvement anyway. So at any rate, there's this need for some sort of reconnection between the youth and their community. Where we currently stand, and I have some links on here, if eventually these are sent out, you could click on to see the Community Arts and Reintegration Project, as well as the Center for Applied Research, where it says run out of at Pitt Greensburg. After about 4 years of implementation, we're working on our second large-scale community mural in New Kensington, PA, and we're hoping to put it up next spring. I say all of this to tell you that when I first set out to develop this idea into a presentation, I had grand thoughts of what it potentially could become. I was going to have some data, feedback from our second round of participants, and everything was going to be great. As I am sure you will hear numerous times over the course of the next 3 days, and as I'm sure you've experienced in your own lives, almost nothing panned out the way we wanted it to. What is fitting, though, and yes, I will be this cheesy, is that this presentation is on resiliency. We are living in times that call for an enormous amount of resiliency on the part of us all, and this conference itself is a testament to the resiliency of the criminal justice field and the people who populate it. So resiliency in its most basic sense is the ability to adapt or recover from some sort of adversity. Now, if you look up the definition on Google, as any good academic does, obviously, 2 things stand out, and those are the ideas of quickness and toughness. To be resilient, one must be able to recover or adapt quickly to the difficulties they face. One is also apparently considered tough if they are resilient. And while these may be indicators of a resilient person for better or worse, in the world of criminal justice, the work of developing resiliency in a person does not happen quickly, and it often requires a breaking down of the very toughness that can produce criminality and delinquency in the first place. It should also be noted that the definition in criminal justice context has been added to and manipulated, and even crime itself could be considered in some senses a measure of resiliency as people adapt to the challenges of their own world. Now, I need to admit that when I set out to create this program through about the 1.5-year planning process that it was with community stakeholders, really the idea of resiliency was never discussed directly. It wasn't until Dr. Rousseau actually reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be a part of a panel. So luckily for me, I'm in a state that has integrated what I believe are many of the building blocks of resiliency into the fabric of its juvenile system. And it's really through this model that I see where our program can play a role. So Pennsylvania uses what is called the balanced and restorative justice model. The 3 main goals of Pennsylvania's BARGE model are accountability, competency development, and community protection. And it's within these goals that I believe the Community Arts and Reintegration Project can have its greatest impact in aiding the development of resiliency within these justice-involved youth. From Pennsylvania's perspective, accountability, and this is taken directly from the Juvenile Court Judges Commission website, accountability refers partly to the obligation that juveniles who commit crime have to communities that they harm. And it becomes the responsibility of the juvenile system to provide opportunities for juvenile offenders to be held responsible to repair the harm that is caused by delinquent behavior. And it's really within that repair of harm that we find our community mural project. Justice-involved youth can use work on the mural to fulfill court-sanctioned community service hours, while also interacting with the community in a pro-social manner, and hopefully benefiting the revitalization and community building efforts taking place. Further, those community members who are a part of the program who choose to volunteer do so with full awareness that the youth participants are on juvenile probation. This kind of affirmation and acknowledgement of the harm that's done by the youth, I believe, can create an ownership of that harm within them, which is very much a restorative principle, but one that is constructive rather than destructive. So this really speaks to concepts like Braithwaite's reintegrative shaming, and acknowledging those offending patterns and the person as being two distinct entities, right? The offending is bad, not the person. In terms of competency development, the role of the criminal justice system, again, this comes directly from the website, is to facilitate efforts and activity that advance youth's competencies so they are less likely to take part in antisocial delinquent behaviors. Priority is attached to activities that provide for skill building, strengthening of relationships, strengthening of relationships with law-abiding adults, and contributing, obviously, to the community. Fostering those competencies in youth not only increases their self-esteem, but also assists in reducing behavior that leads to reoffending, which is what we're all addressing here. And there are 5 core competency domains, which include pro-social skills, moral reasoning skills, academic skills, workforce development skills, and job training, and then finally, independent living skills. And now, obviously, these are suited for a wide range of youth, but it's within the pro-social skills domain that our program can helpfully help youth develop and model those skills. One of the subsets of the pro-social skills domain is interaction skills. So do kids listen well? Can they deal with positive and negative feedback? Do they accept criticism? Can they effectively disagree and handle conflict? Another subset of skills are cognitive skills. Can you recognize and define and clarify a problem? Can you set realistic goals and engage in step-by-step planning? While it's the Juvenile Probation Department's responsibility to really focus on the development of these skills through internal programming, we have created a program where they can come to model these skills. Right? They get to voice their opinions on what they would like to see in the community and in the mural. They dialogue with community members to address changes. We also work with them pre-design meetings to create expression through art, both alone and in groups. So the youth then get to bring those ideas to life at our community paint days where these skills are practiced even further. The community protection element tends to be a product of successful implementation of the first 2 barge domains. So I really won't focus on it here. Getting the close to 10-minute mark. So does CARP actually build youth resiliency? Your guess is as good as mine. This is a terrible thing to say, but these are some of the current hurdles that we face. Youth participation, we've only had 10 youth that participated in the program so far. 7 that worked on the first mural and 3 that worked on the pre-design meetings before the second mural before COVID hit. Also, the first mural was a pilot. So the second was supposed to be our attempt at doing it better and starting to collect some data. Right? We didn't get to do that. And then finally, I didn't develop this with an evaluation in mind. And I know that hurts some of the academics listening to this, but especially not one that was geared towards youth resiliency. So we need to figure out what to do next. We need to refine our measures of resiliency and overall program success and see how we can actually implement those. And this is where you all come in. So any feedback, these are just some pictures from our mural so far, but any feedback is greatly appreciated on this idea of resiliency and our program. And you have my contact information here. And I thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
All right, hello, hopefully you can see my slide. Welcome, I'm Danielle Rousseau from Boston University. And today I am going to be talking about a trauma-informed embodied mindfulness and yoga program, particularly set in a carceral setting. And this is through Yoga for Change, which is an organization in Florida. So this study was actually funded by the Chartrand Family Fund. So I want to acknowledge that to begin. And just to set the context, Yoga for Change is a nonprofit organization that delivers curricula that are based in embodied movement and mindfulness. And they target multiple specific populations, including veterans, people who are incarcerated, people facing substance use, and youth as well. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk specifically about their carceral programming. So this is a specific curriculum-based, trauma-informed yoga program that was implemented in Jacksonville, Florida, in the correctional facilities in Jacksonville. So I'm going to kind of jump over the literature because I know that Dragana is really going to dive deeper into this. But overall, we know that there is support for the benefits of trauma-informed yoga in doing this work, and multiple both physical and mental health benefits. But I'm going to talk more specifically about this program. So again, this is a multiple session curricula that is based in thematic content as well as utilization of embodied movement, so yoga and mindfulness. And it is a 6-session curricula, and it was implemented, as I said, in Jacksonville, Florida, in both facilities for men and women, and multiple facilities, including jail facilities, a more traditional prison setting, and then a treatment-focused correctional facility. And as part of the assessment of this program, we did both pre and post class assessment. So that was a card that participants would complete coming into the session before they participated in the day's programming, and then right after the session. And those cards looked at rates of, or their self-assessment of things like stress and mood, and allowed for some journaling as well, some qualitative responses. And then also we did a pre and post curriculum assessment. So that was a survey that students, the participants, completed before and after the 6-week session. So those were a variety of validated scales as well as qualitative feedback. And this picture is just one example of feedback. And I don't know if it's easy to read, but it says, this is from one of the respondents: "You taught me that I am worthy of forgiveness, love, and sobriety. And I truly desire a better life. I have the tools and support strengths for my recovery." So, as I said, this was a program that was implemented in 3 different facilities in Jacksonville, Florida. And the facilities all in programming addressed both men and women, with separate classes for men and women. And study participants were primarily white, 57.4%. They were primarily male, 67.3%. And a mean age of 33 years. But the range was from 18 to 64. And of the participants, so those who engaged in programming, 60% were male, 30% were people of color, and almost 70% were white. And we had 2 groups that we looked at as far as the assessment. We had participants, so students who were going through the 6-week curriculum, and then we also had a waitlist control group. So these were individuals in the institution who were interested in the program, but participated in 6 weeks of control group assessment before they engaged in actual programming. So we were able to compare those who participated in the program with those who were in the wait group as controls. And as I said, there were 3 different facilities. One was a pretrial detention center, and about half of participants were housed there. There was a community transition center, which was more program focused, about 30% there. and the Montgomery Correctional Center, which is a more traditional carceral setting, and that was about 20% of participants. And again, both men and women students at each. So I'm going to talk a little more specifically about our outcomes. And so we had both quantitative and qualitative outcomes. But overall, what we found was that programming is improving the well-being of participants and that it increases interpersonal effectiveness. So it is helping individuals both in their mental and physical health, as well as in their connections and interactions with others. So here are the results and comparing the control group, the waitlist control group, which is the darker line, with the program participants. So those are the students who went through the curricula, and that is in the tealish color. So after completing 6 weeks of the Yoga for Change program, participants demonstrated a significant increase in ratings of post-traumatic growth, emotional regulation, self-compassion, sleep, and forgiveness. And this is all as compared to the control group, who did not demonstrate this significant change. So the change that participants experienced, these improvements, were statistically different than those of the control group. Women participants experienced increased self-compassion and compassion for others, more so than the men, and improved sleep, while men did not experience the same improvement in sleep. And similarly, results show that white participants were more significantly impacted by the program and showed improvements in emotional awareness, self-compassion, and sleep, while the participants of color did not. So we see some definite differences in the experience of the program, depending on identity characteristics like race and gender. And part of that might be due to the teaching pool of those Yoga for Change teachers that were offering the class. They were all white teachers, predominantly female, although all male classes were taught by men teachers. So overall, we see significant improvements for the students, for the participants, in things such as forgiveness and their ability to manage their anger. We see better emotional regulation. We see increased post-traumatic growth. We see mental health improving. And we also see these individuals reporting having a range of additional coping tools. So there's clear evidence of the program's strength. And this image is a word cloud of the most commonly used words, terms in descriptions of the program and the qualitative questions. But really, this study demonstrates the positive impacts for this curriculum-based trauma-informed program. And for participants, programming improved mental and physical well-being while increasing the capacity for self-regulation and positive coping. And results are particularly notable because they occurred during incarceration. So incarceration is a time that is, in an environment that is very traumatizing and re-traumatizing. And we're seeing these significant benefits in spite of that. So really powerful. Some other areas I'll just go through quickly that were impactful. We saw, based on the qualitative outcomes, we saw change in feelings of being calm, decreased stress, improved physical well-being. A quote here from one participant: "I have definitely learned a lot about myself through my yoga experiences. Yoga has truly helped me to be able to stop, breathe, and think through stressful and angry situations during my incarceration." Participants also talked a lot about sharing tools, bringing tools back to the unit, sharing them with peers on the unit, also sharing them with family, friends, and their children. And here's another quote to demonstrate that: I show several girls in the dorm poses, and we do a body scan in my room at night to go to sleep. Another said, I have shared everything I could from discussions to moves with anybody that would listen. So ultimately, we see that we are impacting lives. And next steps, we are in the process of moving on to other programming and expanding throughout the state, including programming to address opioid use, as well as new programming that is just beginning in specialty courts. So carceral programming in specialty courts, including mental health courts, veterans courts, drug courts. And that is it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope you all can see my screen. If not, please do let me know. Thank you all so much for being here today. I am excited to share with you my progress on a meta-analysis project that I have been working on with a colleague for the past couple months. So very quickly to begin, it is well documented that the United States has one of the highest incarceration rates among any developed nation. And not only that, it also has the highest recidivism rates. So today we have about 2.3 million people incarcerated with about an 83% recidivism rate over a 9-year period. Now, this high incarceration rate and recidivism rate is partly due to unresolved and untreated mental health problems, as well as addiction. And although there's a wide range of therapeutic approaches that have been implemented in carceral settings, as well as community settings, little research exists on the potential of alternative methods such as yoga, mindfulness, and meditation to reduce recidivism rates. So because of this high incarceration rate and high recidivism rate, there is a need for a closer look at rehabilitation practices, specifically those of alternative methods, which focus on combating risk factors that essentially get individuals incarcerated and sent back to prison. And some of these, for example, are substance abuse, mental health, and trauma, which are all health concerns of incarcerated individuals. Nevertheless, though, there has been a growing consensus on the practice of yoga to help rehabilitate incarcerated individuals. For example, research has shown that yoga reduces psychological distress, and these are things like anxiety, stress, depression, PTSD, anger, and violence. And in addition to that, yoga has shown to increase impulse control. And these are things like decision-making skills, self-compassion, self-esteem, a sense of connection to oneself as well as others, attention span, the ability to relate to other individuals when they are going through something, an increase in emotional awareness, and lastly, self-regulation. So all potential skill sets that may help individuals avoid incarceration as well as reincarceration once they are released. So my research question for this meta-analysis is, what is the overall impact of prison yoga on recidivism rates? And I hypothesized that released men and women who participated in yoga while incarcerated would have lower recidivism rates than those who did not participate in the yoga program. The inclusion criteria for this meta-analysis included the identification of the dependent and independent variables. So we wanted the studies that focus specifically on recidivism rates as their dependent variable and yoga as their independent variable. We also wanted studies that were tested under the condition of experimental designs with random controlled trials and with target populations of adult men and women who were over the age of 18 and who had partook in any type of practice of yoga inside correctional institutions. We also agreed that we would not limit the search strategy to the sample size and country of origin because we wanted a bigger scope. So I ended up creating a search strategy based on a list of online databases that I found through systematic reviews of yoga. And some of these include the Web of Science, PsycInfo, Medline, PubMed, and the Cochrane database of systematic reviews. I also created a keyword search, and these included words like recidivism, recidivate, prison, jail, and different variety types of yoga. So after completing my search on yoga and recidivism, I ended up getting a total of 266 hits, 3 articles that were found via the Cochrane database of systematic reviews. Unfortunately, only one of those articles looked specifically at yoga and its positive effects on the risk factors that are associated with recidivism. So although it did not look specifically at yoga and recidivism, it did cover the basics of the risk factors that are associated with recidivating. Because of the fact that it didn't focus specifically on yoga and recidivism, we decided not to include this in the meta-analysis. Now, out of the 11 studies that were found via the Web of Science, only one study looked at pathways to desistance, which had potential to inclusion. Although it wasn't recidivism, we decided because it's covering desistance and ways of avoiding reincarceration, we could potentially include that in our meta-analyses. And out of the 249 articles that were found via Google Scholar, unfortunately, only 2 studies looked directly at the effects of yoga on recidivism rates. So essentially, only 3 out of the 266 identified sources looked at yoga and its effects on recidivism. So after a careful review, I only identified 3 potential sources that could be included in the meta-analysis. Unfortunately, that is not enough to run a meta-analysis. But nevertheless, I want to give you just a little overview of the 3 studies that I did find. So the first study that was conducted by O'Connor and colleagues, this study looked specifically at desistance, but it included yoga as well as other interventions. So you can see on here that it included things like education, life skills development, nonviolent communication, as well as transcendental meditation. So although it wasn't just focused on yoga and the combination of other classes, there was support for this humanist, spiritual, and religious practice and their positive effects on the desistance process. Now, the 2 studies that looked specifically on recidivism, one was conducted by Landu and colleagues in 2008, and they looked specifically at the effects of yoga on recidivism rates and found that those who actually participated in yoga while incarcerated had lower recidivism rates. So those who participated in 4 or more classes, only 8.5 of those individuals recidivated, and those who participated in a lower amount of classes, so maybe 1 yoga class, 25% of those individuals had recidivated over time. And then last but not least, the most recent study that was conducted by Kowalski in 2020 and colleagues also looked at the effects of yoga and recidivism and actually found that yoga may in fact impact recidivism rates. So their study found lower recidivism rates among released individuals who had practiced yoga during incarceration. So at year 1, their incarceration rate was 29.8% smaller than the comparison group. So almost 30% smaller than individuals who did not participate in any yoga while incarcerated. Overall, those who participated in yoga while incarcerated demonstrated lower recidivism rates throughout a 5-year follow-up period. So although the sample size is very small and the meta-analysis cannot be conducted looking specifically at yoga and its effects on recidivism rates, we were fortunate enough to actually find 3 studies that at least looked at recidivism and/or desistance and gave us some information on the potential of the practice of yoga to reduce recidivism rates overall. So the next steps, we've actually decided to refine our search strategy to include the effects of meditation and mindfulness on recidivism rates. As of now, the search I did run for meditation, and that has given me a total of 135 studies. That search is still not done. There are a few other databases that I have to look at. So the next step is essentially to collect all these studies, to review the abstract to see if they're looking specifically at recidivism. And if the sample is small, like I mentioned, we will move towards gathering information on mindfulness and recidivism as well. So the goal here is to essentially over time include all three of these methods in review of how effective they are in reducing recidivism rates. So this meta-analysis will essentially focus on Buddhist-derived interventions and recidivism rates overall. Once the data is completed and we have essentially a good amount of articles to conduct a meta-analysis, the goal is to run a bivariate and multivariate analysis to see the overall effects of all three of these programs and their effects on recidivism rates. So at the most basic level, we plan to run a bivariate analysis. If we do want more information, like how sensitive the effects are or whether intervening processes are measured or anything like that, we will run a multivariate effect. But essentially both are recommended. So we do plan on running both a bivariate and multivariate analysis. Thank you all for being here today and for listening to my presentation. I want to thank CrimCon for giving all of us this opportunity to come online and share our research and our progress. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. That was great. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Please ask in the Q&A. I see a hand is raised, but please ask it in the Q&A instead. And I'll read them out loud for panelists.
This is what happens when I teach too. Nobody has questions typically, or they just don't want to do it.
Or it takes 30 seconds for them to start. And then there's that awkward period between.
Yeah.
Dana DeHart has a question, well, lots of questions that she will ask via email later. But can you all talk a bit about selection bias in yoga class recruitment and whether the actual participants voiced much skepticism at the outset? And that's in the Q&A typed if you want to look it over too.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there was some, particularly, or I'd say more so with the men than the women. Definitely skepticism or not knowing what to expect, coming in thinking I'm not going to like this. Quite a few said that they came to the program just looking for something to do that was physical. So there were a lot of limitations on even just ways to work out or ways to have physical activity within the institution. So they saw the program as a potential way to do that. Many had martial art backgrounds or fighting backgrounds, things like that, where they saw this as something that might be close enough. And they gave it a try because of that. And then many of those described kind of coming around and seeing the multiple impacts of yoga, really liking the yoga practice. And quite a few became interested in the more philosophical side of yoga as well, requesting from teachers books about yoga philosophy and the kind of other aspects of yoga that go beyond just the asana or physical movement. So they were very hesitant in the beginning or kind of coming in, but then grew to be really supportive of the program and requesting additional classes and additional programming, inviting others in the institution, telling them about programming, and also saying that they wanted to continue programming once they were released. And Yoga for Change offers the community-based classes, so classes that are free that people can join once they are released. So they were able to stay connected to that and continue programming. And we have had a couple students go on to become certified and to be yoga teachers themselves now, which is really cool.
That's awesome. So cool. I'm a yogi, so of course I love this whole panel.
Awesome.
Let's see. Dana also asked, did you all run across any distance tech delivery?
For the curricula?
I think so. Like maybe
Okay.
is it facilitated virtually?
Yeah, these were all, at least in the study, it was all in person. So this was obviously pre-current times. And programming was being done where the yoga teacher went into the institution and taught yoga classes. The Yoga for Change, the organization, has had to pivot and is now offering virtual programming as well, particularly in the current study with the opioid treatment facilities. And that, you know, COVID hit kind of in the middle of that funding and that study around using this programming in opioid treatment. So many of those facilities shifted to virtual programming, and it has been working. There are certainly challenges, but it has definitely been possible and been pretty successful overall.
Awesome. So another question is there programming or content offered during the meditation/yoga, or is it, quote, just the practice of yoga? Sorry, just asking about yoga. Is it more than physical?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So the program is more than just the physical movement. It's a curricula that was developed. There are a few versions of the curricula, and it's taught. It starts with kind of grounding and breath work. There is physical movement, but there are also key thematic areas that are incorporated through all of the classes. And so the teacher is trained in the different themes and in administering the curriculum. So these themes are woven throughout the class. There is the physical practice, there is meditation at the end of practice, and then there is also a period of discussion and some journaling and kind of personal reflection as well.
Awesome. Dana asks, are curricula publications available for Yoga for Change?
The curricula are not public, but I'm happy to share more information on the program and on the research. I have a brief I can share if you email me to connect. And I can also share more about the curricula as well. It's right now, programming is in Florida, 4 areas in Florida, but the goal long-term is to expand nationally as well.
Can you post your email again, please? Let's see.
Sure, can I put that right in the Q&A?
Yeah, I think you could answer it. Type answer. Any other questions?
Yeah, I don't seem to be able to type there, but I can. Should I share that screen again just for a minute?
Yes, please.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Jennifer, hi Jennifer. Jennifer asks, are there plans to expand the program to youth in carceral settings? That's a great question.
Yes, they actually do youth-based programming in schools, but also in youth correctional facilities as well. So that's already going on.
Perfect. That's awesome.
Okay, there is the info, both the Yoga for Change website and then my info. If you want to grab that.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions from attendees? All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I am going to end this panel. Thank you so much, panelists, for presenting your research. I really enjoyed all of your presentations. And I do plan to look up your research after this because it's personally meaningful to me. So thank you. And if you are looking to attend the next panel, I am going to close this session out and you'll have to join again through the link in the CrimCon program. So that is how this will work. And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.